Paranormal experiences don't really work to a timescale, and therefore, for the spooky season, and indeed for the whole of season 13, we invite you to listen to a dark Minisode. Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Dark Minisode. These shorter and more succinct experiences with the paranormal are becoming one of my favourite times of my recording week. And that's twofold. Firstly, it's because these stories tend to have a lot more room for our own imagination to take control over what we're seeing in our minds. And given we're clearly all fans of the paranormal, no doubt those blank spaces left by somebody's experiences will be filled with some pretty horrific things from our own imagination. Secondly, many of these experiences have been sent to me over 5 years ago, and I have recorded on previous podcasts which have been long since deleted. So it's been marvellous for me to revisit some of these experiences and put them in front of a new audience that the submitter of the original experience deserves. And so, without any further ado, let's jump right into our first experience on today's Dark Minisode. This happened to my friend and I our freshman year of college at Kent State University in the fall of 1996. We all met whilst living in the same dorm. We would frequently have slumber parties, where we would crash into Cara or Amy's room and stay up late drinking and smoking, and cause general havoc. It was during one of these slumber parties that we got the bright idea to make a Ouija board out of the top of a pizza box from our dinner delivery, and a mirror that we popped out of a powder compact. Using a metal nail file, I scratched a see-through spot onto the back of the mirror so we could use it as a planchette. And we just used a Sharpie marker to draw out the basic Ouija board on the blank side of the cardboard box top. It was our new favourite drinking game. Katie and I were the ones who were using the Ouija board the most, often on our own. And we would always get through to this sassy spirit named Gary. We stupidly would antagonize Gary. It would call us names, and we'd laugh and laugh. But then things got weird. One night, as we were both listening to The Cure, the board kept spelling out, "Love Katie, love Katie, love Katie." We, being absolute idiots, were saying things like, "Ooh, Gary wants to be Katie's boyfriend. Ooh, he wants to kiss you." After a few minutes of this stupidity, the stereo started going haywire. The volume control started going from loud to soft, and you could actually see the knob turning. The CD was skipping on the song Disintegration. The equalizer and the volume were all over the place. And the planchette was zooming on the cardboard, spelling out, "Never talking to you again, never talking to you again," over and over. We, scared as hell, immediately stopped playing. The next day, Katie ran into my room, and she was furious. She said, "How did you do it? Why did you do it?" Well, I had no idea what she was talking about. "The writing on my ceiling." So I made her show me. In her room, in a place no one could have reached, not without climbing on something and seriously straining their back, wrist or arm because of the way the furniture was set up and the angle of the writing, were these awful, all caps block letters, never talking to you again. We were so scared. We left for Thanksgiving break, and she said Gary followed her home. She was losing sleep and utterly terrified. We clearly had no idea what we were doing or what we were dealing with. We tried to do a binding by wrapping the board and the mirror up in white ribbon. We didn't get rid of it though, because once again we didn't know what we were doing. But it did work for a small time, at least for the time of finals between Thanksgiving and Christmas break. Unfortunately, during Christmas break, Katie said Gary was back and was scarier than ever. He was causing havoc with her electronics at home. Things were moving, disappearing. And the worst was when the dolls her mum insisted on keeping in her room would move by themselves. We came back from break and Amy met some random dude in the student lounge. She liked the look of him and they started talking. She told him what's going on and that we were completely stumped. He told her that we were dealing with something that isn't really a ghost. He said it was more of a demon, and that he, conveniently enough, knows about demonology. And the best way to fight this is to call upon bigger demons. No way, random dude. Kara, the most logical and the smartest of us, decided the best thing was to just go to a local psychic and find out what the hell to do. The psychic told us to put the board in a box with salt, sage, and a bunch of other herbs I don't remember. She then told Kara to get rid of it and let her go with a stern warning for all of us, which was simply, don't ever mess around with a Ouija board again. So Kara took care of it, and the problem was fixed. We wasn't entirely sure that the dry rub, as we called it, of salt and herbs could possibly do the trick, but it did. I suppose we had way more faith in what the psychic told us than anything else. Partially because she believed us, and partially because it was a relief to have an adult tell us how to fix our mess. I definitely now know a lot more than I did then about cleansing and cleaning and grounding and shielding, and how to get rid of negative energies. I view this whole experience as my wake-up call, if you will, to what can happen if you mess around with things you don't understand. I still don't mess with Ouija boards because of this. But I also know that if I had to, for some reason or another, though I don't know what that reason would be, I'd be way more equipped to deal with it. Firstly, thank you so much for submitting your experience. And secondly, I will say the Ouija board is one of those things which I flip back and forth with. Almost every other week, we have a story regarding an experience with a Ouija board which ends negatively. Now, I'm not stating that there should be a positive experience with a Ouija board, but what I am saying is if we have a tool there that apparently can bring forth evidence of the paranormal, why do we avoid using it? I personally have done the Ouija board around 200 plus times. And there's maybe been one occasion where I've believed something may be a play. We just didn't realise it at the time. We basically asked a few questions of this alleged spirit that was coming through the board, and the answers that it gave, we believed were incorrect. And so we stopped playing with the board and carried on with our days. In the following week, when people went back and spoke to their parents, they found out the answers were all correct. For example, the note taker, somebody who wasn't even touching the planchette, asked the house number he lived in when he first moved to Sri Lanka. And they gave a number of, say, 119. And he said no, it was 22. So, of course, we just stopped playing and carried on with our day. When he asked his parents about it, they said no, they lived for a week at 119 before moving to number 22. And that was one of maybe 3 or 4 questions which we found out it actually gave the correct answer to. And I often think back to that moment. Not that I fish, but I imagine it would be like imagining you have caught a really big fish, but you convince yourself it's an old boot, so you let it go. But I do wonder still what we had on the end of the line on that particular day. But as with the majority of Ouija board stories, I guess we'll truly never know. Let's take a quick break in today's show to talk to you about Factor. Now, this holiday season, you may be looking for nutritious, convenient meals to keep you energized on these jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal delivery service, can help you fuel up for breakfast, lunch, dinner, all with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, you'll eat well, you'll stay on track with your healthy lifestyle, all whilst tackling that holiday to-do list. Factor's fresh, never-frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes. All you have to do is heat and enjoy. Skip the stress of meal prepping over the holidays with Factor. Choose from over 35 weekly flavor-packed, fresh, never-frozen meals that support a healthy lifestyle and meet your meal preferences. Looking for special occasion meals during the holidays? Well, level up with Gourmet Plus options, prepared to perfection by chefs and ready to eat in record time. Or maybe you want to watch those calories over the holidays. Well, try the dietitian-approved Calorie Smart meals with around or less than 550 calories per serving. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals delivered to your door and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. But don't take my word for it. This November, get Factor and get eating well. Head over to factormeals.com/darkparanormal50 and use code darkparanormal50 to get 50% off. That's code darkparanormal50 at factormeals.com/darkparanormal50 and get 50% off. Our next experience, I believe many of you will have heard before. Not necessarily through me, but it's been featured on many paranormal podcasts, many paranormal TV shows. But this is the version that was submitted to me many years ago. When I was studying at the University of North Texas, I stayed in the oldest dormitory on campus, called Bruce Hall. This was a few years ago, around 2014-2015. It had been there since the school was established, and had originally been an all-female residence. This would have been between the 1920s and 1930s. There are 3 main ghost stories attached to the building that were passed on by resident assistants and students alike. The least believable centered around an upside-down clock behind the front desk, which had stopped around 3:15. supposedly a demon had been exorcised from a student, and the demon had passed through the clock whilst leaving. And the story went that anyone who touched the clock would be the next one to be possessed. It had promptly stopped and turned itself upside down. It had been left there for years as no one wanted to test the story by moving it. The second story revolves around the death of a boiler room maintenance man, dubbed Boiler Room Bob, who had been either lynched in the basement or killed in an elevator accident, depending on who told the story. However, the most famous of the ghost stories was of Wanda. Apparently, she's so well known, she's been investigated by all of the American ghost hunting TV shows. The story goes that while at university, Wanda had lived in the dorms while attending. She'd become pregnant, and knowing she would be ostracized and potentially kicked out of school, she tried to lose the child. Without access to an abortion, she took matters into her own hands. She made her way to the 4th floor, where there is the attic catwalk, which houses plumbing and whatever else dormitories store in an attic. In a private corner of the attic, using a wire hanger, Wanda tried to rid herself of her pregnancy. However, she accidentally injured herself, and she bled to death in the attic. It's said she stayed around after her death, living in the dorms and taking a severe dislike to men. My first year living in the dormitory, I had no real experiences. Past one of the back stairwells being vaguely sinister to walk through at night, and the music practice rooms in the basement being a touch spooky. My second year, I transferred to the special interest wing for music students, which was housed on the 4th floor. And this was when I began having ghostly encounters. Initially, I had a roommate who was not exactly considerate when it came to our shared space. I didn't notice anything strange, and if things were moved around or missing, I would assume it was her. She got into a rather bad accident, though, and transferred to the 1st floor, meaning I had the room to myself for the rest of the semester. She gave me her key, meaning only I and the staff had access to the room. The first incident I noticed happened the night of a concert. I was running late, and after hastily applying my makeup, I'd left my room in a rush, planning on organising my vanity counter once I got back. But on getting back, all of my makeup had been lined up along the edge of the vanity counter, from smallest to largest. I couldn't explain it. My former roommate had returned her key, and the RA that would have been doing any hall checks was at the concert with me. The following week, I was doing laundry and watching a movie on my laptop. It was around 11 p.m. I gathered one load from the dryer and set it on my beanbag chair to be folded once the rest of my laundry had finished. I'll admit it, I was watching a scary movie, so I was already a little spooked out. But what happened next, I couldn't explain. All of the laundry fell out of the beanbag chair. The pile wasn't particularly large, and even if it had come down to balance, most of my smaller items like socks, underwear, and small washcloths had been at the bottom, sitting in a sort of indent. It would have had to be lifted out of the chair, because there was nothing left on the chair. these smaller items didn't simply tumble from the top. Everything had been thrown to the ground. Once that happened, I closed my laptop and walked downstairs to the front desk. I sat there with the staff on duty whilst I calmed down. A moment later, one of the boys from down the hall came downstairs, claiming he had seen a red light darting around his room. He lived across the hall from where Wanda died in the attic. It was quiet for a while, but the last experience I had before getting a new roommate happened whilst I was gone. I left my room as usual to go to class, and upon coming back, I had trouble opening my door. The lock was fine, but I couldn't swing the door inwards because something was wedged behind it. After a few moments of wiggling the door and finally getting enough space to get my hand round the back, I found what was blocking the door. My beanbag chair had been pushed up against it from the inside. I was able to grab and pull it out from where it had been lodged and got inside myself, but I still can't explain how it got there. Shortly after, I was assigned to a new room, and unlike the first room, anything strange that happened in this room I could easily explain away. Now, it's been a good few years since I first received that email, and I must say I've since seen on YouTube many investigations about that particular residence. But from that email, the experience or story that entices me the most is the one the writer claims least likely. For me, there is something deeply exciting and fascinating about the idea of an exorcised spirit passing through a clock and causing the clock to stop. And I love the added folkloric element of, don't touch that clock, because you will be next. Well, that brings us to an end of this dark minisode. I'll speak to you all again on Friday for the penultimate episode of Season 13 of The Dark Paranormal. And don't forget, if you'd like early ad-free access to all of our shows, plus access to the Patreon-only podcast Dark Bites, head over to patreon.com/The Dark Paranormal. But until Friday, take care.